gentlemen, we are live.
Live. That's nice. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Bonus Roundtable. My name is Knox Buer. I am the interim host as our illustrious Luxall CV is currently indisposed at the moment. So I will be handling the hosting duties. I'll chime in every now and then because I think I'm interesting. The topic we have for tonight is titled "Working on the Railroad: How to Run a Campaign Without Forcing Player Choice." We have had a few requests to touch on this subject. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We have once again on our illustrious rotating panel of I don't know reprobates this evening. If we could go around the table and introduce ourselves and just kind of give a little bit of a primer blurb about who you is and what you do's.
Is this like where
Okay.
is this where we say this is my name and I'm a DM and people
Mhm.
clap like this is AA?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and start with the perennial man in the corner, the man who is in charge of most of our fates most of the time, the one and the always there, Miro Raven.
Hey, Miro Raven. Most of the time permanent DM, but I'm getting a break this next Monday. Woot! And also get a break on every other Thursday. So yeah, hi.
Mr. Spence, if you would.
Spence 21, or else that you can just call me Spence. That I am basically the host of the Revenge. That I am the host of the D&D game Revenge of Stefan Carcass. That is on alternating Thursdays, and then it is a pleasure to be here.
Neat.
Hi.
We do have we.
I'm-
There we
Oh, I'm sorry.
don't worry.
I'm Four Toed Sloth, new DM to this group. I do a lot of paid for content, professional DM on Roll20. No, I've also been in the process of writing up some Western content.
It's something that something that I've just noticed is actually started to gain a little bit more traction. You're starting to see a little bit more of the American West, post Civil War, Wild West kind of settings and themes running around here in the past about the past year or so. I think a lot of systems are actually are there's a lot of content creators that are starting to streamline more gun and rifle play in traditional sword and sorcery systems.
Goblins on a train.
Goblins on a train.
Mm-hmm.
So, gentlemen, tonight, speaking of goblins on a train, tonight's topic is the ever-present danger of the railroad, and how to avoid it. For those who are uninitiated and don't know, when in the context of tabletop role-playing games, a railroad is when the players don't really have a choice on what to do. The story is laid out linearly, A, B, C, D, E, and there is nothing that happens in between. It is first session, this is going to happen. Second session, this is going to happen. Third session, this is going to happen, and there is no deviation. While it can, while it can be an issue and it can kind of stagnate some fun, it is always an ever-present danger. Simply because, as a DM, especially when you are dealing with a custom setting, it's something that you have to actively fight against doing, simply because you want them to move along and move along into the story to get to the next cool thing. So what are some of the things that you guys do to try to avoid the railroad? Let's go ahead and let's start with Mr. Spencer.
Alrighty then. Alrighty then. Thank you for that. That one thing that that I try to do in order to avoid just like railroading the story along is basically sometimes I just actually just like let the party struggle until that they ask the proper questions. I mean that this has just happened like at our last Extra Life game, to where that the party was literally stuck at the first puzzle for 20 minutes at a bonfire. For those are the uninitiated, that I am also the resident Soulsborne fan. So, long story short, I had created a Dark Souls esque 5e game, to where then that they were to where that the party had got done defeating a hag coven, to where that a bonfire just appeared in the middle of the floor, and that's where we begun. And then I did not give them any direction, that they had just asked all of the questions, but instead that they pondered for about 20 to 25 minutes before that they finally sunk in to ask. And then I just think then that that's kind of good to let players be a bit more discovery, rather than always showing them the answers.
Nice. Uh, Mr. Miro, sir.
I don't know. With railroading, the way I've tried to avoid it is in the preparation stage of writing an adventure or writing a campaign, is just to put down bare bones so that the temptation to be married to anything is not there as much. It also allows you to use your improvising skills more, because I guarantee you, your party will come up with a way scarier, way worse idea than you ever could if you just hint at something and then ask for a dex save. Usually, if I say roll a dex save, a lot of people start going, well, why the fuck are we all going to die now? But the big thing here is, again, looser ideas so that they have more of a sandbox to play in. Like, I mean, they might have to go down that hallway because it's the only hallway that's there. But if they decide to say, screw the idea, just like, okay, and then go. I mean, be willing to always do that. And also, if they don't go down into this one room where you had a really cool encounter, save that encounter for another dungeon they go into, and now there's a room that has that thing in it.
Yeah, the old adage of just because it's on paper doesn't mean it has to happen here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The mythical and elusive four-toed sloth.
Oh yeah, very mythical.
Hmm.
I actually am a bit neurotic, and I'm a over prepper. Um, Dangerous trap to fall into being a DM. But I have like this theory that the world is a spider web with every line that is interconnected somewhere. And in my worlds, the players, every action that they do sends a ripple out through that spider web. And so whenever they go from point A to point B, as soon as they get to point B, they see 3 more points leaving out from there. But it all kind of circles out. I try and make it to where no quest is invaluable, but it's always the player's choice.
So kind of like you can you in a hallway you got 3 doors. The 3 doors all lead to different things. Each one of those things is progresses the story in one way, shape, or form.
Yes, like all roads lead to Rome eventually. Like you're not real. You don't force them into doing it. I have a campaign currently that's going, and they have not touched the main mission that they were given at the beginning of the campaign, and they're at level 6 now. Like they got the mission at level 1, they're at level 6. They have not touched that mission, but they have progressed the narrative of the story along just by the actions that they've chosen to do while interacting with the world. Like you go here, you meet this person. This person actually has something to do with the original quest that you were going on, so on and so forth.
Because I have a tendency to we live in a post Critical Role world when it comes to tabletop gaming, and
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
we live in a world where Matthew Mercer exists, and when it comes to world building, I honestly can't think of anyone more meticulous than him when it comes to the world building. People can say what they want about how he runs his game and what happens in his game and everything else. But one thing you really can't deny is the fact that when it comes to Exandria, Matthew Mercer knows what happened last Thursday in Wildmount. So having that kind of big brain energy is something that I attempt to emulate.
Mm-hmm.
In the effect that when in a situation where the party needs to go to the abandoned keep in the swamp, if they don't, as the DM, I know what is happening in that keep in the swamp. If they don't get there in a certain amount of time, then what's going to happen is whatever is going on in that keep is going to happen. And at that point, the party goes from stopping what's happening in that keep to dealing with what happened in that keep.
That's how I've been.
That can,
Right.
I was going to say
and
that's
that
how.
can,
Oh, go ahead, Carl. Sorry.
that can be a daunting task. The problem is the fact that can lead to a lot of what comes into my second question. That can potentially lead to a bit of, especially creatively, with DM story burnout. And okay, if that's the case and this happens here, well, if that's happening here, then this is going to be happening over here, and this is going to be happening over here, and essentially you end up world building so much that you as a DM can get frustrated if the players don't find it, and that rut that you get in of, okay, they've done this, they've gone through this entire campaign, we're done with this campaign that was 70 70 events long. Now what do I do with these other 450 that I had that were distinctly tied into what I was doing, or to everything that was happening specifically in this one. So when it comes to this that process of that potential creative burnout, how do you how have you learned to rein in your stories so that they don't get out of hand, because and you don't end up A, burning yourself out with the creative burnout, or B, wasting more time on things that the players will never see.
Can I jump on that one real quick?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I got two examples with this. The first one is I run a Dresden Fate game, mostly Fate. Okay, if you ever play the Dresden Fate game, don't play the Dresden Fate accelerated system. It's much more streamlined, and the book is not a nightmare to read through. But what it is with that is I've had so many different ideas, and then the party not deal with it. Like, that game has probably close to 150, 160 faces, which is what the system names NPCs. Some of them were from one session, and some of them were for others. And with that, I've had a game recently that was a little 3-session one where I showed because my wife plays a Warden of the White Council. Another one of our friends plays an Emissary of the Loa. And then we got another one, our other friend Emily, who's going to be running a game this Sunday for her birthday, plays a very powerful hydromancer. Like, they're all very high level magic, and they learn to rely on that magic. They seem to almost solely focus on using their magic and not the other mechanics. So I had a everyday mundane mortal with four I think it's called feats that he could do, most of which were just not die, and how he completely upturned the supernatural order by using knowledge and calling in favors from NPCs the party had not used or talked to in 2 to 3 sessions. And I did that to remind them that you have all these other resources that you can use, and you don't have to individually go and search for this one thing. You technically have an aspect of the game to where it's like, oh, well, we got a buddy that's on the police force. Let's talk to him and have him look something up for us instead of break into the police station and possibly have like some big bad thing happen. And so with that, what I've done is when I've written up a story for that game, knowing there's so many faces, I select who's going to be in the game as a main one and think about what logically makes sense. And then I just write down key bullet points. Like, this is what the bad guy's goal is. If they don't discover it, this is what happens. Much like you were saying, Knox, earlier, I have cause and effect the whole time in the Dresden game. It's bouncing around, and I know what's going on that they don't notice. And if they don't catch it, I make that maybe the focus of the next session. Like, they had a NPC who they never talked to, who ended up becoming a bad guy. Because they'd never talked to her, she ended up talking to the BBEG and then becoming a little mid-boss for them to have to deal with. And she would have been a very valuable ally, but that's just not how the game went. And even though I wanted to go differently, I was like, well, these are their decisions. And my job as the DM here, especially in the Fate system, is I am just the hand of events. So they're really telling the story within this sandbox I made. So I let go of a lot of that, and I break it down into bite-sized chunks for what makes sense to the idea, if any of that makes sense.
Does that make a lot of sense? And then that just to basically just kind of like jump in next on just like Knox's point about creative burnout. Whenever I would try to run the Revenge of Stefan Carcass prior to the pandemic and stuff that I would say that my first run of this game had lasted about almost 2 years. 2 years that but it was at times that I had this one player that he would actively try to always break the campaign, and just that I would have to like improv every single little bit of just info, regardless of like how much that I would try to balance it out and try to be a good DM and stuff. But yet that this one player in particular would kind of complain about, why is combat dragged out so much, and then that I have get, and then that me and him would always butt heads about it. But now, since I got a little bit more of experience of being just a DM and stuff underneath my belt, I just basically share a philosophy of like that you brought this that you have brought this upon yourself, because that while that I am a storyteller DM, that you can certainly ask like Miro, and then also Gray Flower, that I am that whenever it comes to combat, I am brutal as a DM, but yet I am also a fair DM. So I basically try to give out three in-game warning shots, and just also a meta warning before a player acts, meaning that as soon as that player steps over the threshold, for example, now that say for example the party has to basically go in and save this queen that who has that now that who had decided to disguise herself as a farmhand to try to get closer to her people, and just like snuff out that this baron that who is being a jerkwad or whatever. Well, just say for example that that the party get this notice about that this baron is about to sell this one farmhand to a buyer for like human trafficking or whatever, but it also happens to be the queen of this said land. And if the party does not and then if the party does not act, that now that just as four Toad Sloth said earlier, that that the world is still ongoing, that your actions are basically reflected, and then that you will have to deal with a new situation of just trying to save this queen from just a tougher enemy. And even though that's more prep work on the DM's part, it is still ultimately it's kind of like a double-edged sword here. And then I am playing Asmodeus's influencer, if you will. But I just think that if that you are running like a if that I just think that sometimes that the sequence breaking can also be a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Sorry about that. I was muted. Yeah, absolutely. It makes you the sequence break has a tendency to kind of make you think outside of the box, and if you're quick enough on your feet to be able to react to that, then that will absolutely give you an opportunity for something else to happen. It'll give an opportunity for the dice to tell the story, as it were. Um, uh, Something that Spence had said earlier about basically just letting the party go until they figured it out. That whole the whole sink or swim kind of mentality. At what point, if that's the route that you go, at what point do you cut your losses and point them in the direction? Because we all know that it's the meme of players walk into a tavern. There's a guy in the corner with a shadow looming over him, and you spend like 5 minutes describing this dark and mysterious stranger who is obviously the quest giver. And there's a guy named Jake in the corner with a scar over his left eye that you literally just throw in for flavor, and they spend the next 45 minutes interrogating Jake on his life story.
Or
At what point? At Do you drop that signpost and go, "Hey, jackasses, it's over there"?
Or someone has a cute dog, and then you learn to never give an NPC a dog ever again.
I mean, if you guys don't mind, I'll take this one.
Yeah,
Please do.
sure. Go ahead.
All right, so that should never be that meme is a trope. It should never be a problem. That's a if I describe Jake with a scar over his eye in the corner and he's a non-essential NPC, if they ignore my quest giver and go talk to Jake because he has a scar on his face, he officially becomes the quest giver. What they don't know doesn't affect anything. Your players don't know who your quest giver is. They just think that, oh, you described a scary dude in the corner. Who wants to talk to the scary dude? Let's go talk to the potbelly guy with the scar on his face. Bet he's got good stories. Make him the quest giver. It's freeform storytelling. So you just have to put the players can never get anything out of D&D that you don't give them. Sitting them in a room full of clues, like they can't physically look around. Everything's based off of rolls, and you decide the DCs of these rolls. And what I like to do is if we have mystery games, a lot, and they're looking for clues, searching a room out for clues. If they don't find a clue here, move it somewhere else and let them look there. I never let my players roll double roll for the same thing. If you're in a room and you do an investigation check on the room, and you find no secret doors, I move the secret door to the next room that you check. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's not hard as the DM. You control everything. They don't see it. So just move it. Put it in their path.
That is 100% the gospel truth right there. That
Yeah,
that is the reason I get annoyed at people who criticize modules. Oh, well, they couldn't find this in my whole campaign, so I was like, dude, you're the DM. This is a puzzle. Put pieces where you need them. Just make it work.
That I agree, and then I actually agree with you, Sloth, because then because of the fact that my style for just like another quick just example here was I had did the old fashioned bandit broken down wagon trope as just a first combat encounter for just one of the players for Stefan. Oh, bless his heart. That perception check, I gave all of the warning shots in the story. Very well. So, and then his perception check did not meet the threshold, and his character believed it to be a safe thing, and it had almost turned into a bloody battle. But luckily, that we had our adorable Era Croker penguin fighter save the day on that one.
I spent every spell slot on healing word to keep the bard up and from dying.
I mean, sometimes you're going to have bad rolls like that. And if you see that it's going to be a massacre, you as the DM, you have the choice. You have to decide what kind of DM do you want to be. Do you want to be the blood and guts, the adversarial DM of yesteryears of the 2nd and 3.5 editions? Do you want to be you versus the players, or do you want to be cooperatively storytelling? And that's up to you as a DM, whoever you may be. But it's cautionary tale. We all know it.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you go out for, whenever the DM's out for blood, he always can get it. No questions asked. I can always draw blood if I want to. I can party wipe the moment we sit down at a table because I'm God. I control the world. Whenever you have that broken wagon and everyone fails those perception checks, have it actually be a broken wagon. It doesn't have to be bandits. It doesn't have to be a combat. Just as an example, I'm not saying that you did that wrong in any way, Spence. I was just giving a different viewpoint. If you're
Right.
worried, you have low-level characters, and an ambush could be deadly because every combat up to level 3 is a deadly encounter. 2 bad rolls, and your player is gone.
Mm-hmm.
In the situation where this one occurred, it was absolutely hilarious because the 2 other players at the table like, no, don't do it. Stop. Please. No. It didn't work. Failed wisdom save for the bard.
So that brings up an interesting question. That just kind of popped into my head. General, because I mean we've all played a variable different amount of games, ranging from the current cooperative storytelling to the older editions and different games that end up playing out the GM versus the players. Have any of you found that the genre moves towards it being the cooperative storytelling? Is it just me, or are the players getting debuffed the longer it goes? And what I mean by that is, if you look at some of the things that player characters could do in 3.5 versus 5th edition, or something that the players can do in some of like Exalted, things of that nature. Is the power creep dropping the more it becomes a cooperative storytelling environment and less of a that conflict style game?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say I don't really feel that way. Like the whole thing with 5e and like, especially for any of us that played 3.5 or God forbid the few of us that actually played 2nd edition, 5e is streamlined. Like I feel like if there's any debuffs on what players could do, it's because when they made 5th edition, they looked at what is the bare minimum we need to have to make this accessible to everybody, and getting rid of like 25 pages worth of feats and some of the really crunchiness. Like I love Exalted, I really do. That was 2nd edition Exalted was my bread and butter for a while, but it can get crunchy and get ridiculous with the sheer dice pool you have to have for anything when you get to a higher level. But if you want to play a demigod, that's your game. What I feel like with D&D is that since some of those big bad look at me shine, I am the barbarian that holds the pass that stops the horde from getting through by myself, that since maybe some of those big bad individual things are gone, people have to do more of a cooperative storytelling. But also, I'll be honest, the cooperative storytelling is more fun for me, because if I'm just on the other side of a DM screen, like, I'm gonna kill all my friends tonight, it's not that fun. Like the idea of a party wipe, I'll do it if it's going to happen. If the dice go that way, that's just what luck was or fate was. But a party wipe to me as a DM's not fun, because then the story ends. And
Agree with that.
and the big
Yeah,
thing
but you
now,
can't give plot armor.
no, I don't give plot armor. I mean, the worst thing I could probably be accused of is I don't scale combat sometimes right. Like
Same.
like in the most recent games, I've had an extra player come in, and I didn't think it would be that big of a deal. But just adding one more player, especially a high DPS like a rogue, Four-Toed Sloth, it can really turn how combat works quickly. Also, I made most of the stuff for that game like over a year ago, and everybody's a level higher than probably when I made it. So that's scaling on my part. But like I said, I'm not going to pull punches. Like Tuesday, I killed a player. Now, the party resurrected him, but he decided to play around basic with a giant magic battery, pump another spell into it, and, well, you overcharge a lithium battery, what happens?
Mhm.
And then he got blown out of the boat, and he literally died in another party member's arms as they got to him. I was like, that's just how it goes. I've had the entire party down to 1 HP, and I'm like, oh, damn, I'm about to have to permanently kill a party member because the bad guy's going to attack, and I'm a big believer in the bad guys know what they're doing, which, by the way, if y'all haven't read the book, The Enemies Know What They're Doing is actually a really good supplementary a guide on that. But I guess to get back to the question is, I think maybe because some of those individual buffs are gone, there has to be more of a storytelling team experience, but I also think it might just be more fun, and that's why it happened.
I think that that the newest DM here, and then plus that I have never ever had a TPK. So far, I've only had one player death, surprisingly, despite the fact of how tough I am in combat. But to echo a lot of what that Miro was saying that I am a storyteller DM. To me personally, that I am more of a cooperative DM, that I want the party to succeed. But if you happen to choose to sequence break, then that I basically kind of sort of treat it just like I would like a multiplayer online game, in a sense that that you are not ready for this area yet. Let's just say that you have a group of level 2 adventurers who are used to fighting kobolds, goblins, and flumps, and then that they travel to another area because that they decide to get froggy, and then that they want to go fight the big bad. You're going to be dealing with orc armies, probably, a Rakshasa, a Deva, all sorts kinds of stuff that can basically one shot you. And then that's not my fault that you guys didn't want to stay up in just like beginner land. You guys have forced my hands to come off. That the kid gloves to come off, because that I have a general rule of thumb for just any type of game that I will run from 1 to 5. 1 to 5 is that I would like to call that we are getting a feel for each other. That the players are getting a feel for that the DM is understanding the players that their characters, etc., etc. But it isn't necessarily like, because it is scary up in those first 5 levels. It honestly is, even just as a DM, because I don't want y'all to wipe out. I want y'all to succeed. But if that I happen to get like 5 crits in a row, so be it. That your character is going to kick the bucket. And then that's just not me being the adversarial DM. But yet that I will never go against a player to basically become that, just because of the fact that if I don't like what you did or nothing, I will never do that, because then that, for one, then that's bad storytelling, and two, that you are just being just a jerk, not to only that player but to your entire table. So that the best thing of always is that I always try to keep everything in character. And then if that you piss off Jake, and then he's supposed to give you, just that quest, or else then that he actually knows just the Mr. Shifty guy in the corner, it can basically be a bad time for your party, or else a good time. It just depends on the reactions that your player go for. And then I actually think that that's what that the modern systems are going for, which is kind of more of a more kind of like story based gameplay that is more reactionary to what the players are doing, versus than that the number crunchy combat that some people like, some don't, some are kind of middle ground.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is also knowing your players. Like from experience, my group, I've gotten 9 players. Now not everybody always shows. Obviously, not everybody shows up, which makes it hard to do hardcore campaign stuff with everybody. And even when we do have everyone here. It's kind of it. I lean more towards story encounters than I do combat encounters, simply because a round of combat can last 20 minutes. And at that point, a 3-hour session is an hour of role play and 2 hours in a fight. Simply because I have to compensate for having 9 people at the table. So what I ultimately ended up doing is I actually ended up splitting the group into two different parties. They were both running around the same world, both working towards a collective goal, but from different angles, and taking care of different things in different areas that could and would affect what happened with the other party. One party raids a keep in a harbor city. The next party comes in a couple of 2 or 3 sessions, ends up having to go to that city 2 or 3 sessions later, and they got to deal with a whole lot more guards than the first party did. That kind of situation. And I think if you can find a good party dynamic of like-minded players, if you get your more combat focused people in more combat focused encounters, and tailor your encounters to your parties, that makes your life as a DM that much better, because you still get the satisfaction of running these awesome story events and all these awesome fights. They just don't happen to the same people. And I will say it was supremely difficult wrangling 2 herds of cats in one world with one big bad. Because ultimately, what was going to happen before that game kind of fell apart because of life was they were going to all take care of essentially different quests to find out and deal with the big bad. And randomly, they would come. And I had it planned out so that, and it happened that randomly they ended up with a keep. They would randomly come back together, and then the parties could switch. Like the party members, they would then come back together and then redisseminate with different party members and go out and take care take care of other things as needed. So they could potentially tailor make their parties for what they were doing based off of the group. And ultimately, they were going to come back together for the big bad fight that ultimately didn't happen. So I've still got quite a few ideas in the chamber ready to go once I start running a custom game again. But since then, it's just been so few and far between for my group that I've essentially taken to running canned campaigns, and realizing that the 5th edition book campaigns have a whole lot more versatility to them and replayability to them than the old ones used to. Like depending on Curse of Strahd, depending on the choices that they make and where they go out of the first village, can dictate it can make for a completely different experience from one playthrough to the next. Dragon Heist is built to be versatile, and it's built to have like no less than 14 different scenarios that you can run out of the book based off of the season that you're in and the enemies and the big bad that you choose. And I think that versatility built into a book is a very good resource to use to give you an idea on how to avoid that railroad like we were talking about before, to give you the options of, okay, if they make a left, this happens. If they make a right, this happens. If they stay straight, both happen. And they can either get one half of the story, the other half of the story, or the whole story, depending on the choices that they make. Because ultimately, it is the player's choices. It is the player's choice that direct your story. If that makes any sense.
It's kind of the purpose of D&D, man. Uh,
Mhm.
I feel
Uh,
like that touching back and expanding on that point you just made, like the purpose of 5e's update is they saw the Fortnite formula. Whenever you make a base game free, it's more accessible to people. That whenever they do, a lot of the reason people weren't getting into D&D is because you want to go get the base rules for D&D up until 5th edition. You had to go shuck out 35-40 bucks for something that you don't know if you'll like it or not, and that's a lot of money for poorer people to try out a game. uh, the the greatest success for D&D is making their core rules freely accessible to everyone. So you can be the poor kid whose parents have no money can barely buy you your school lunches, and you can go get the core rules of D&D and play it with your siblings or your friends, and you're not locked out of that experience. And all the supplemental material and stuff is paid, just like with the Fortnite and PUBG and all these other very popular games that just blew up all over the world. Is because it was freely accessible. And I don't think that the player characters were nerfed. I believe that they wanted people to have a more broad audience, right? They wanted more people to enjoy it. And everyone's not an accountant. I have problems with math. If I have to roll 16 different types of dice for one attack, I'm going to get confused in all of it. And, Pathfinder is out there. You have all these other tabletop systems. I think 5e just went for a broader market, and it's evolved towards cooperative storytelling because of that.
I think it might have also started evolving more towards cooperative storytelling after, well, the hype of several of the online live plays.
Mhm.
Like, well, I mean, the big one, Critical Role, but you also got Critical Hit. You got, oh God,
One crit
Adventure
wonder.
Zone.
I'm trying to think of the one that has the motivational werewolf coach. I just blanked on its name. Um, but you also got like High Rollers from England. You got Acquisitions Inc. from the guys who did Penny Arcade. So, I mean, all this coming out here and realizing that you watch a DM, and even if it was just because they're on a podcast and just watching one person talk the whole time would be boring. That people watching that and seeing that everybody had a little bit and they could chime in, and with as goofy as an idea as, say, naming a dragonborn after two of Santa's reindeer. Like, oh, I could do that. This isn't so unobtainable, and maybe I could push my story. I mean, I've actually seen a lot of studies recently that have been done to where kids who do speech get better after playing D&D, because once they get that confidence that I can tell my story here at this table, they get they're like, oh, well, I can stand in front of a bunch of people and do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And making the resources readily available to these people helps expand your market. Like Critical Role and these other branch offs, they're all capitalizing on a larger market. D&D was on the decline until fifth edition.
Right. And then just to echo what both of y'all has said, that that the first ever experience with D&D was just listening to Critical Hit whenever that I was working at my old job at the time. But yeah, then that especially whenever like Miro says that I am a stuttering DM, but yet that it has actually helped me out up in my professional working in like not at the point that some of my managers and supervisors are like just saying like, Spencer, that do you even stutter? But you say you have a stutter, but you don't stutter. And then that D&D has helped me out just become a little bit more comfortable speaking in a sense. And in that we are all sharing just that our own unique stories and such. But I am also going to play Asmodeus' influencer yet again and say that the Critical Role in other shows like that, like Bards and Nobles and all of the other D&D uh, live play podcasting, that they kind of set up this expectation to where for both DMs and players that games have to be like this. Well, we have to also remember that those are like professional and semi-professional individuals that are basically doing this as a job or else a secondary job on top of their other stuff, such as like voice acting, writing, etc. And then that whenever that we just go to like the local game shop, before it was spook before that it was pandemic times, then that we have mainly just like min maxers that basically want to just try to make, excuse my French here, that the GM's night a living hell sometimes. And then that we have been saying that that we want to avoid becoming a railroad. I kind of I kind of always see us as a GPS more so, cuz think about it. We all have a GPS, and then that sometimes the party that is driving the car, that they will take alternate turns, but at the end of the day, that they will end up back at their original or else intended destination, or just at least that all four of us here hope so.
Well, forgive my vulgarity when I say this. Grave Flower is the first person I heard say it. When you get to individuals like watching, say, Chris Perkins, Jeremy Crawford, Matthew Mercer, Satine Phoenix, DM, they're the porn DMs, is the way he put it. And at first I was trying to figure out what that meant. It's like, to expect that from everybody is unrealistic. Especially the people who work for D&D or people who have consulted for D&D because they've worked that, they've done that. I mean, most of the time your DM is, let's be honest, the first DM you had was the dude who had the books, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
And, and for me, that was one game where it was like, this is awesome, because he was really good. And the second DM that I had was me. I I listened. You and Spence have name dropped Critical Hit a couple of times. Critical Hit was my gateway, and as far as I haven't listened to anything in the new season in the past 2 or 3 years, but well, I haven't listened to anything in the past 6 years. But as far as I know, Critical Hit's still 4E. They're still running 4E because that's what Rodrigo wants to play. And I listened to I started listening to Critical Hit round about episode 5, and listened to every up until about 5 years ago, and it was the tail end of 4E. 5E was literally about 6 months away from coming out, and I was like, you know what? I'm doing it. I ended up finding the books and finding all the resources and finding the canned campaigns, the campaign folders for 4E, and just got a bunch of, and just like, all right, everybody, we're doing this now, and they were like, okay, whatever, and they sat down, and that campaign lasted 2 years, and it was awesome, and we got some really interesting stories out of it. Like Ricky table surfing into a dude and killing him. Why? Because he said he wanted to do it, and I thought it sounded cool. So I let it happen. Uh, and that's how I started. I started in fourth, routinely playing in fourth. Uh, Speaking of scenarios like that, what is the just out of the blue? I'm gonna throw y'all a curveball. What is the most curveball wackadoo thing that you have let a player do that worked?
I'll jump on this. Anything
Go
that anything that Emily Roldan has ever done in the
The
Dresden
coffee,
Fate series.
the coffee witch.
Yeah, we have a friend, Nerd of Prey, that plays Genie, the caffeinomancer slash hydromancer, the coffee witch of New Orleans in the Dresden game, and Genie has found a way because the other two characters, Sybil and Eleanor, can use pretty much any element. Her character can only use water. She has found a way to take defensive spells and turn them into offense. Like, hey, what happens if I put this spell that makes a wall right underneath this enemy and it pushes them up 15 feet in the air and the wall or the roof's only 10 feet? And I go, huh, okay, let's try this. Or I bribe the cop with fresh coffee from my store. I was like, okay, roll. All successes. Like in Fate, you have fudge dice, which, either have plus negatives or blanks, and she rolled all pluses with a +2, so she got a 6, which is superb. I was like, well, shit, yeah, he'll let you through for a cup of whatever is in the thermos. Or the best one. The best one is I brought out a manticore. Yeah, she did insult a really, really big jerk of a dude about comics so hard in that game that he almost died based on stress with the way the system works. But the best one she did was I had this manticore, a ancient manticore, and in the world of Dresden, if you say the before the name, like the Kate Sith, that's the first one when it comes to the Fae. Like, it's not a Kate Sith like all the other ones that are out there, all these other little king cats of the Fae. No, if you say the Kate Sith, the Lananshi, the Bananshi, the original one, like the Red Cap, there's power in that. So I had the Manticore, and it almost ate Genie. I forgot Genie had the ability to open up ways into the Never Never, into the magical world. She dropped my BBEG of that section of the game through a hole, and it couldn't get out because it didn't have the intelligence score to find a way out. She literally yeeted my bad guy away. And I absolutely loved it. Like, anything that Little Bit does is nuts, and it's like, all right, let's figure out how this works.
It's that and that's like mine. Mine was. You've got friggin' Ricky table surfing into a dude just because it sounded fun, and things like or my nephew or my 18-year-old nephew he's been playing for for about 3 or 4 years now. But we're running a Curse of Strahd game, and they end up in the windmill fighting the hags, and he is a big burly lizard dude, and the warlock cast Tasha's hideous laughter on one of the hags. She couldn't do nothing. It succeeded. She couldn't do anything except laugh. So he very calmly and very gently picked her up like a newlywed bride crossing the threshold and threw her into the oven and just stood there and just stood there holding the door shut. She failed her first two rolls to after the damage. She still failed her first two rolls to get to get out of Tasha's. By the time she did, she only had a quarter of her hit points left. She is a hag. Her strength is nothing. He is a lizard folk. He's a lizard folk ranger. His strength is pretty much everything. He was a melee ranger. He literally just stood there for 4 rounds of combat holding the oven door shut. And that same thing goes into the things that Genie does. It's that new player unbiasedness. It's that new player of, I don't know how this game works. Okay, just tell me what you want to do. Okay, can I do this? Which is just, you put a new player in a room in one of these games and tell them you can do anything that you want. These are your specialties. Everything on that sheet is a specialty thing that you can do. You can do whatever you want. The shit that they will come up with boggles the imagination because they don't know it. They don't know to rely on the sheet. So they get creative simply because they don't know any better. Yes, if I hit this guy with my sword, I'm going to do 3d8 worth of damage to it, and it could kill it. But if I'm not familiar with that, and I don't know how any of the other rules work, I'll throw a tankard at him. Well, it's a silver tankard, and the guy's a werewolf. Holy crap! And then you let the players dictate what happens from that point on, because you have no idea whether the guys that you've been Moose. I know what Moose is going to do. I've been playing for Moose for years. I know how he plays, so I know based off of his character what decisions he's going. A lot of the times, what decisions he's going to make, down to about 3 or 4 different variations on that theme. I don't know what Genie's going to do. Like, if I was running a game with Bit, I have no idea what Bit's going to do. I walk in 100% convinced she's going to throw me a curveball, and I look forward to it because that means that I have to think. And it's probably going to look cool.
One curveball that I can say that I have experienced, that the same player that I was talking about earlier, that his character Chunt Buntley grappled Oni to death. Pretty much that he was playing this homebrew class called the Pugilist, but he was also wearing a belt, a Storm Giant strength whenever that I made a noob DM mistake of selling him a belt of Storm Giant strength for only 3,000 gold. But anyway, then I'm way beyond that now. But he basically had a move on his sheet to where he pinned this Oni to the ground, and then that the other party members had Looney Tuned, sawed this Oni in half, could not escape. I tried to Misty Step, fail. No, that Oni was sawed in half and dead. And then that the zany stuff that they had put me through was just hilarious. Just like that they had took the ambassador of that the big bad evil guy, dressed him up in makeup, beat him to a pulp and stuff, and dressed him up in horrible drag, and just basically held him hostage to extract information from while taking him back to a party and just pretending like none of that happened. I'm like, okay, we're gonna let this happen.
I've never had a Looney Tune saw in half session, but I did have this young lady play with me for a while, and she was exceedingly innocent throughout the whole, like in real life and in character, just this innocent little thing. But she was vicious, uh, halfling barbarian, and throughout the entire campaign, she makes every effort to collect animals everywhere she goes. She had a pet frog, a pet slug, a parakeet, and they killed some wyverns. With a natural 20 roll, she found a wyvern egg. And in the campaign, there was an evil king who was basically Joffrey from Game of Thrones. And they had met him, and he had kind of taken a liking to the little innocent girl, wanting to try and torture her or whatnot. And she rolled a really well animal handling check and nature check to figure out the exact day that egg would hatch and get close to the time, and then she mailed it to him.
Four-toed sloth, I gotta ask, is this your wife that did this? Because I'm
No,
saying
it's not my wife.
it would track for her just a little bit, I feel.
She won't play D&D. She just listens.
And that's the players taking the story and running with it. The best story that I have is my my best female friend, Krista. She was playing playing Curse of Strahd. And technically, we're still playing it. We're just on a hiatus. But she is playing a paladin, I think. Yeah, she's playing a paladin. Well, if you're familiar with Curse of Strahd, there's a sub arc called the Dream Pasties. It ultimately ends fighting the hags in the windmill. Well, the scenario is they're walking through the first town. There's an old lady pushing a cart, knocks on a door to sell these pastries that basically knock you. They're drugs. They knock you out because just existence in Barovia is horrible. Well, it's a mother, a father, and a child. She hands the mother and the father each a pastry, and then grabs the kid and starts to and shoves him in a sack and starts to walk away with him. That is how the scenario. That's what the party sees. My party then go after the hag, get her to release the child. She disappears, and Krista immediately turns around and kicks open the door to the house. She then looks around, and there's nobody there. With a successful perception check, she realizes that the entire family is hiding in a closet. She then kicks down the door to the closet and attempts to, air quotes, rescue the child and threaten the parents. She tried to kidnap the kid because the parents tried to sell their kid for drugs from her perspective. And she is standing just intimidating the ever living shit out of these two peasants who have just had their child nearly abducted to be eaten by a hag. They're freaking out, and now this this friggin' fish lady in armor is screaming at them that they are both pieces of shit for trying to sell their child for drugs. So now she's gonna take the kid because they don't deserve him, and we're gonna take the kid, and he's gonna come, and we're gonna find somewhere better for him to live. And it took like 3 members of the party literally 10 or 15 minutes to talk Krista down from taking the kid with her.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what happens when you let your party go, when you let your party decide what happens.
Or to use one that, because I know my darling wife is watching this in another room with a bit of a delay, someone will roll to shit in the street.
And Critter Showdown is literally something I look forward to every year on your birthday. So, with that said, I'd like to give this last little bit of time that we have tonight, and go around the table so that everyone can participate in the sign off before I give our holy and traditional sign off. So, Mr. Four-Toed Sloth, if you would bid our viewers and listeners adieu.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking about D&D. I love all things D&D, and I hope that some of the things that we brought up and talked about tonight can help bring some of you potential DMs out of your shell, because we need more of you out there. I am swamped on Roll20.
Mr. Spencer.
Yeah, that just I had also enjoyed this talk well. I think then that there was a lot of information and stuff that can be gathered from this, and then that just storyteller DMs just try to remember to be more of like a GPS instead of just basically just trying to tell the story that you want to tell. Just so like let the players decide their own course of action.
Miro Raven.
Make sure to keep things open. Make sure to have fun. Make sure they're going to have fun. Never let the wool get wet. And bon nuit.
Well, we've reached the end of yet another roundtable. I hope I have done our fair Luxall CV justice in my hosting duties tonight. If you would like to partake in more team bonus action shenanigans and chicanery, follow us on Twitter and keep an eye on our Twitch feed for when we go live. Follow us on Twitch. You will be notified when we go live. We appreciate y'all sitting around the table with us and listen to us talk some story again. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, don't let your meatloaf.